Would you shut down the government again?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens on February 15th. And
you're not taking it off the table?
Well, I don't take anything off the table. I don't like to take things off the table. It's that alternative. It's national emergency. It's other things. And, you know, there have been plenty national emergencies called. And this really is an invasion of our country by human traffickers.
That was President Trump on the potential of another partial government shutdown if lawmakers are unable to strike a deal on funding for his border wall. Joining us now, member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Democrat Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. Good to have you.
It's good to be here
this morning. By the way, is Milwaukee going to host the 2020 Democratic National Convention?
We are sure fighting to make sure that happens. We're putting in a very strong bid. And, you know, I think the pathway to the presidency goes through Wisconsin. If you look at Trump's narrow victory in 2016, I think we want to send a message that the heartland is really in play, and we need our candidates to get there. So I'm really excited about the prospect of Milwaukee hosting. And where would you rather be in July of 2020?
Well,
Houston,
I would
Miami,
love to be
or
there.
Milwaukee?
You guys have a healthy, robust Polish population, so
yes, we do.
I love it there. Yes, you do. So let's get back to the border wall. What are Democrats thinking at this point when they hear President Trump talking about possibly declaring an emergency? Is the negotiating part of your brain going, really? Why don't you try that? Go ahead. Yeah. Do that.
Well, except we saw how much harm was befalling not only federal workers who were without 2 paychecks, but also all the people who rely on the departments that were shuttered.
Wouldn't he do that in lieu of a shutdown? Wouldn't he declare an emergency to try and use the government funds?
Well, he
that
shouldn't.
Could be
he
coming
shouldn't
from
do that.
elsewhere?
Yeah, he shouldn't do that.
I
he
know
may
that
do
he shouldn't do that.
But I think about you know, the negotiations. You know, Congress has a job to do. That job involves budgeting and appropriating funds.
Right.
We passed the Homeland Security budget in the Appropriations Committee in the Senate last June. And we actually gave the president what the administration had asked for, which was at the time $1.6 billion for border security. That was technology, that was improvements to border infrastructure, that was more personnel, including immigration judges. And you know, what was agreed upon back then became something that he just walked away from and said, you know, the wall that Mexico was supposed to pay for was going to be the cause of his shutting down the government. Well, now we're in a situation where Congress is going to do its job. And I know on the Appropriations Committee that Democrats and Republicans can work together and achieve this. That's what we're going to do. If he declares an emergency, first of all, he shouldn't. But I think everyone's clear that that's going to get litigated. Not the question necessarily of whether there's, you know, his opinion of an emergency is the same as other people's. But I think the, you know, we will rue the day when we let a president start taking money for one purpose, declaring an emergency and using it for another. I'm sure that there are many Republicans shaking in their boots about that happening with a future Democratic president.
Yep, that's why I asked. John Heilman.
Senator, I want to ask you, we got the State of the Union coming up tomorrow night. It's always a big thing. This one was a little delayed, a little deferred, but we're going to get there tomorrow. You have an interesting guest coming with you.
I do.
That I think is someone whose humanity is an interesting story on the human level, but also designed to kind of, I think, as usual in these cases, illustrate a larger point. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I just came through a very competitive, hard-fought election. And I wanted to focus, as I hope all candidates do, on the issues that people struggle with. Diane told me her story a long time ago. I met her as an activist for treatment and a cure to multiple sclerosis. She'd been taking a medication for 23 years that slowed the progression of her MS symptoms. She changed insurance a few years ago and couldn't find coverage for her MS medication. And she and her husband had this sort of, at the time, naive conversation like, oh, let's find out how much it cost. Well, the answer was $90,000 a year. And they had that conversation together you would never wish on anybody. And she said, I'm going to stop taking it. And there are so many people in that position across America. I could have told, 18 more stories. But Diane is now an activist for lowering the price of prescription drugs as well as a cure and treatment for MS. And she'll be my guest and raise the profile of the issue.
And Adrian Elrod, I don't know if you have a question for the senator, but take it if you do. I also would love to hear your thoughts on the Democratic response and how that decision was made, because a lot of the guests that are coming to the State of the Union, including an undocumented worker who was fired from a Trump club, they are sending messages to this president by their presence.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Mika, and it's wonderful to see so many members of Congress who are using their one seat that they get, their one guest spot at the State of the Union to make an example and really send a strong point. I'd like to ask you something really quickly, Senator, back to border security and immigration. Obviously, Leader Pelosi and Leader Schumer have made it very clear we're not going to give Trump his money for the wall. But do you think Democrats run the risk of looking like they're too lax on border security by saying we're not going to give this funding? Do you think that that puts us, especially if we're going back into another potential shutdown, what kind of risk do you see Democrats putting themselves in by taking this tack?
Well, first of all, I hope we can avert a shutdown. Everyone does. And I don't think we're going to go in that direction with all the president's bluster. But I think taxpayers want us to be smart and effective with their funds. They were told the wall, this big concrete wall, would be paid for by Mexico, and I don't think people, if someone else is going to pay for it, fine, build your wall. But we know we can tunnel under walls, we can throw things over walls, and it's not effective. We had the biggest fentanyl bust at the border just last week.
Right.
It was at a port of entry.
Right.
So we need to do better. We need to have technology and detecting devices in order to be able to keep us safe and secure. The taxpayers want us to do smart things, not bumper stickers.
Right.
Yep. Yamiche.
Ralph Northam, if he ends up resigning, but other Republicans, including Donald Trump, who at one point called Nazis good people, if he gets to stay, do you think that bodes poorly for Democrats because he's so Teflon and has been allowed to remain in office as he's kind of had these gaffes? Or do you think that shows that maybe that's going to be a soft point for the president in the future?
Well, first of all, I think that the governor should resign. I think he's shown himself sort of irreparably damaged in terms of his ability to govern. And as far as Trump is concerned, I remember the lead up to his election and thinking every day with a new breaking story, oh, this is his last, this is his last chance, or it's over. And obviously that hasn't happened. It's why it's so important that now that we're sort of into the 2020 presidential election, that we show as Democrats that we're united in the effort to defeat Trump, as well as to share our hopeful agenda of fairness and responding to people like Diane, my guest at the State of the Union, who have real challenges that need facing.
All right, Senator Tammy Baldwin, thank you so much. I'm all for Milwaukee 2020 Democratic National Convention and Know Your Value event while we're at it. Thanks very much for being on.